Today's story is Raventown, Part 5 Finale, written by Aakash Sharma. How have you been, son? He asked me in a dry yet mocking tone. His voice stretched thin with his flesh and skin falling off. All that was left of Joe Summers was his mocking skeletal smile and the stench of hate and malice. This was not natural. I knew that under circumstances of nature, I would have the insane urge to expel the contents of my stomach there and then. Yet this place was not governed by any laws of God or nature. I know what you have to say. Without me at your side, you grew up a lot tougher than I could raise you to be. I cannot answer any of your questions, but I suppose you wouldn't need me to do so now, would you? The structural mass of bones and ligaments was almost clean. Had it not been for a few stubborn pieces of flesh on the framework of the bones? I took in a deep breath. This land wasn't governed by nature's laws, thus I knew that my fear at this point was only a choice, an instinct of the human mind. So I strengthened my resolve, pushed away the thoughts of consequence, and leaned myself forward to face myself directly with the monster that I knew as my father. "Fuck you," I uttered with the utmost hate, disregarding Daisy, who probably could not hear me speak. She was in a world of her own at this moment, and I could only hope it wasn't one as malicious as this one. "You're a coward," I spat. "You blew your brains out when we were kids. The life you had all along was nothing but a mask. You were a scumbag, and you died like a scumbag should have, with your brains all over the toilet. You're holding your fear back, yet you feel like that would give you power over me? Oh dear boy, this isn't a realm of fear," he said, now leaning in closer. "It thrives on hate. I know you have nothing but anger for me, and I know that if your sister had been here, she would have been the same way you are. But do you know why?" "What do you mean?" "Oh, you do know why you hate me, son. Your mind doesn't know yet. Do you think hate would really come from a place where only grief sows?" "The fuck are you talking about?" "Grief, boy. You don't grieve for me as a good son would have. You despise me." "Of course I despise you. You're a coward." "A coward?" he asked with his same unfeeling, untelling tone. He leaned much closer to me than I could take. I felt the cold from the bones, and I smelled that rotting smell. That fucking smell of hate, of suffering, of evil. "I am what I appear to be. I am a dead man who tells a story of truth, and in this story, son, I am no coward." He wrapped his skeletal hand around my neck, tightening his grip. I did not feel any pain, but I saw streams of red making their way down my left shoulder. "You know me as your monster, the thing that you look out for in the dark. The thing that lies under your bed at night, the thing that looks back at you from the mirror, the thing that helps shadows betray you. I, my son, am that thing. That is what I am, and this is what I look like." His words seemed to be nothing but mad ravings, but the more I thought about them, the more my mind emphasized on them, the more I learned. My memory was broken, yet I had started to put things together, completing a puzzle with the picture that I didn't want to see. "How did I die?" he asked. "You shot yourself in the bathroom," I answered, now my voice trembling even in a place like this. "How did I die, son?" If I said it, it would make it real. I can't let this horror come alive. I needed to do something about it, carve my tongue out if I could, but the temptation to speak, to let the truth spill, it was far too great. I killed you. I shot you in the bathroom." "In the bathroom, eh? Now who's the coward?" "You were big. I was afraid." "Coward. You were an awful man. You monster." I looked straight up at him. I knew there was a tear down my eye, an impossibility. "You did those awful things to Abigail, to me, and you took judgment in your hands? You fucking monster!" I yelled as loud as I could. "You were our father! A father to his own executioner. If I could, I would have killed you over and over and over again. Because you don't belong here. Down there where people live. Rest in hell, you son of a bitch." Silence. "Hell? Where do you think that whore wife of yours is right now?" he said in his usual empty tone. I felt my hand grow heavy. I held on to something. "There it is. A chance to change the course of time. What happens to that girl is in your hands now, boy," he said. I didn't know what was happening. All my emotions had been coming back to me all of a sudden. I think I faintly felt my heart start thumping in my chest too, and a slight perspiration running down my skin. "My life or Daisy's? The farm takes one," he spoke, now standing up as the skin of his body starting to surface, along with strands of fabric forming into a white tank top and an old pair of jeans. Cindy de la Croix came up from behind me, her skin pressed against my clothes. She had been naked. I felt an urge to relieve myself of my clothes as well, and fall into her for once and for all, but the fear at that point was already meddling with the anger in my heart. I knew in my mind that I was on the brink of collapse. Anger and lust, the two parasites of my soul, now stood at the end of me. At that moment, I foolishly, without a thought, made my choice as I picked the gun up and shot the man who called himself Joe in the face, spilling his skull and brains all over the bathroom floor. Blood spilt along the tiles, and a chill began to take over the room. I breathed out with my jaws hung open in shock, letting out a puff of white mist. I hadn't even realized that I was all alone. Daisy wasn't here, neither was the porn star. The bathroom door at the end leaked white light, and I knew that it was where I had to go. I fell on the dirt. I felt the handcuffs straight on my wrist. Daisy was rushed to the hospital along with me. They told me that my mouth had been foaming and my eyes had turned back into my skull. They were afraid that I might have had a seizure, but that wasn't the case. I was going to jail. There was no avoiding that. I had killed a nurse, and I had planned to confess the morning after. I knew Abigail wouldn't press any charges, but there was still a chance that she would try getting me locked up. A place I can't do any damage, just like her husband was. "Take this, take my car, don't ever come back." Thomas Sky's words echoed in my head as I drove on the lone roads. I was upset. There was a part of me that wept at the thoughts of never seeing my sister ever again, but another part of me was glad. She would be safe, far away from me and the truth. Sky handed me a white envelope along with a set of keys to the car when I last saw him undoing my handcuffs to the hospital bed. He knew something I didn't. In that envelope, I knew there would be something for me. A truth which, if I hadn't known, would drive me mad. I never saw Cindy. I never saw Anne. I never even felt their presence around me. All I felt was the cold air and the sorrow that still clung to me. Eventually, the suffocation of the car and the overwhelming feelings from what had happened had been too much, and I had to stop. The scream at the side of the empty road didn't let much out, but it did relieve me a little. I also fulfilled that urge of repulsiveness and threw up away from my car. I didn't cry. I had been past that point, dangerously past. And that's when I knew I had to inspect the envelope. Inside, there lay an even smaller envelope containing cash, enough to help me for the while that I couldn't work. But that wasn't what I needed right now. What I needed was some information, yet there wasn't any. Other than cash, there was only a tiny bundle of what I could tell was the same incense I smelled in Sky's house before. Sky knew I wasn't an idiot. He didn't provide any instructions for me, but I knew what I had to do. The incense covered that malicious stench. It helped my mind ease wherever I went. Home was no longer home for me, and I found any excuse I could to stay away from it. The bottle was never something I could get used to. The taste of alcohol always disgusted me, and I suppose it was also the smell of it. At night, there were no dreams. Nothing at all. No nightmares, no flashes, Not even fucking falling from a high place or a monster chasing me, just an emptiness. Sleep felt like a prison, and it was hard to get any work done when I moved around with my mind standing on a twig. The car and the cash I eventually got rid of, but the spirit of Raventown, I know it'll never leave me. And now, as I think about it all, about Thomas Skye, the nurse, about the Flex, Ms. Booth, Abigail, Walt, Cindy, and Daisy, Raventown comes closer. So much so, in fact, that I could hear the lost spirits in Raventown. And I know that the only way to silence them is to stop listening. And missing one ear doesn't make much of a difference. So that gun, next to a picture of the family that I lost, the one that was taken away from me, it urges me to pick it up and to stop listening. For good. So that, my lovely listeners, was the fantastic finale of this wonderful series, Raventown, written by the wonderful Aakash Sharma, a fantastic author that really knows how to write a dark and twisted tale. Honestly, this ending did make me depressed because it really outlined the fact that this whole story of Ed trying to do the right thing to save his niece ended up becoming this situation where Ed had to accept that he was actually, to a major extent, the bad guy, that he killed his own father, the fact that he would never remove himself from that awful stench of evil. So, in the end, fantastically written story. Obviously, the end is open for interpretation, but, I think it's somewhat obvious what happened afterwards. Yeah, thank you, Aakash. Thank you to everyone who listened. I really do appreciate it. If you liked this video and would like to hear more, consider joining the Nevermore. All you have to do to become part of said Nevermore is click that subscribe button and that little bell thing next to it. That way you're aware of all videos I post when I post them, and I post a lot. Down in the description there are also links to my Patreon, Ko-fi, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, etc., and a page where you can submit a story to me if you have one you would like me to read. All of that out of the way, my friends. Thank you so much for being around. Thank you for sticking around this month. The story rounds out a wonderful May for me. It was a great month. I gotta figure out what I'm doing for June. Probably more of this. Alright, everyone. I love you all. Stay safe out there. See you in the next video. But until then, sleep well.